And it struck me that this theme of building bridges was very well illustrated by this place. My friends live in an apartment just looking down on this first bridge that you see here in the slide, which is a footbridge. It's the Millennium Bridge, the newest of those four which you can see. But it also struck me how changing needs mean that we have different bridges between different entities over time. And this was so well illustrated here in Newcastle and Gateshead. The high-level bridge, very, very innovative in its time in the 19th century for both road and rail. The Tyne Bridge, which is just now for road and which you may see familiar as a shape, the Iron Bridge behind, which later got extended and made much bigger as the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It's the same design. And then the Metro Bridge for light rail, and then lastly this Millennium Bridge for foot and cycle. So it's not just one bridge. We have to keep building bridges because our needs change. And again, as I was trying to prepare, I was thinking about my own bridge building. And it's grown from my research interests, but also from my personal experience. So this notion that science and practice are separate is actually foreign to me. It is not a concept which I would recognise. And my personal history shows this, I think, that when I started teaching physical education in the coalfields of South Yorkshire, I realised that not all girls shared my love of sport, and that was quite a realisation. I recognised that they had less opportunities for the joys of sport than their brothers had, and that seemed to me to be wrong. And I was angry when I started reading policy documents which called women sports illiterate. I didn't think I was sports illiterate, and I didn't think many of the people I played sport with were sports illiterate. How could they label people like that? And then I realised just how many other people were excluded from sport, not just women and girls, but the poor, people with disabilities, minorities, and so on. And so that's been a process of commitment for me to working as a researcher, as a teacher, as an activist, to try to make sure that sport opportunities were equal for all. And just as an example, and as a link with the next full session, the International Women's Sport movement came about because researchers worked with people in government. Researchers grounded in practice worked with policymakers. And that's why it became such a powerful movement. And this relates to my current role as president of ICSSPE, because I think ICSSPE also is about building bridges between science, between education and advocacy. Because we're not simply researchers, we're trying to convince people in government, in the commercial sector, that it's worth investing in sport because of its values. So those three functions of ICSSPE, science, education and advocacy, are very much in line with what I've tried to do all my professional life. And I think it's important to recognise that each one of these roles can make a difference. Each one of them contributes to sport for all. Some of you may know the writing of Jennifer Hargreaves. She's a brilliant theorist in the area of gender and sport. But put her next to a politician, and she is really not very good at it. And she once complained to me that she wasn't being taken to meetings with politicians. And I said, yes, but Jenny, because you're such a good academic, you can't make your arguments simple. And politicians are simple. So each one of us has a role to play. Jenny writes like an angel. She has made enormous contributions to the whole area of understanding of gender in sport. But she's not a politician. So I see practice and science as complementary worlds. I see science as rooted in experience. It can't be otherwise. Science is about observation and actually listening. It also should have a purpose. It should be about making a difference in some way. It should be about making sense of the world, about questioning why some things happen. And I'll try to give some examples of that. And I believe, and some scientists would question my belief, that science needs a standpoint. I think you need somewhere to stand when you are doing research. And my standpoint is equity, in and through sport and physical education. So all my research is grounded in the values of equity, in the values, I think, of sport for all. And I think ungrounded knowledge is dangerous, just like this looks pretty dangerous. If you don't have somewhere safe to stand, how can you make sense of the world? So my position is that sport and physical activity has something for everyone, like this little chap here. Just look at his face. And we all need courage and skill to articulate that special something for each person for sport. Now science sometimes makes us uncomfortable. This is a great quotation, I think, from Martin Luther King. It's surprising how many people find it difficult to think about what they know best and value most. There are times we have to go outside our comfort zones. And that's what science is for. One of the greatest philosophers of science was Karl Popper. And these quotations, again, illustrate what I'm trying to say. If a theory claims to know everything about what you're talking about, then it's probably wrong. You need to think again. He was a really straightforward thinker, but a very, very profound one. And I love the way in which he says that science must begin with myths and with the criticism of myths. Because I think science is about myth breaking, and sport for all is about myth breaking. Let's talk about assumptions about difference. And the problem is that we tend to polarize differences instead of looking at relationships. We need to look genuinely at diversity and confront our own ignorance and address it. We don't know much about other people's experiences. And that's one of the roles of science, to try and take us out of our own experience into others. And that means that we have to challenge these polar views, body-mind. That's something we struggle with all the time in our dualist language. It's problematic for us. Culture and religion. How is it that some of our great religions have become so polarized from each other? And why do we allow that to happen when so many of their values are the same? Political systems, we see it all the time in party political quarrelling. Look at what's happening in the Eurozone right now. And sport for all and elite sport. These should not be polarized. They're interdependent. And we should recognise the interdependence. And that relates to our systems of value and the way in which we value what we do. So I think we should be challenging double standards. I love this cartoon, and I'm going to read what it says for the translators. These are the two elderly people. You can see they're elderly because their bodies have, as we say in English, gone south a bit. And he's saying to her, "Good Lord, Ethel, you can't appear in public like that." It's a great double standard. But we have so many of them in sports science and in sport thinking. We need to look again about what we mean by performance, what we mean by science, and evidence. What kind of evidence do we look for? Challenge stereotype views, and I'll come back to stereotype in a minute. Question why some kinds of performance are more valued than others. Why is a featherweight boxing bout supposedly less important than a heavyweight one, when actually the footwork's much better and the skill levels quite often are higher? Why is women's sport less valued than men's? Why is able-bodied sport more valued than people with disabilities, Paralympic sport and Special Olympic sport, when the achievements are just as great? And the Canadians have a great saying, Canadians who work in women in sport, they say, ask why and change it. That's why science and practice need to work together. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with these definitions, but I think it's important for us to recognise the power of stereotypes on both sport and on science. If we say that characteristics of one category are only for that category, we are actually limiting people's options. These statements, women aren't interested in sport, boys don't like dance, older people can't climb mountains. Tell that to people like the explorer Ranulph Fiennes. This is not about limiting people's experience. Sport for all is about extending people's experience. And of course, stereotypes are very related to myths and help to redefine the myths rather than challenge them. If we deal in stereotypes, we're falling into the trap of exclusion. It's both anti-educational and anti-scientific, and it ought to be anti-sport for all as well. And the problem we have is that in many sport systems, these stereotypes are actually built into them. Just imagine why FIFA sent the Iranian women's football team home because they wanted to wear tracksuit pants. Absolutely crazy decision. But actually it had a fantastic positive result because it got the government of Iran directly behind the women's football team. I don't think anybody else would have achieved that. It's a very interesting example. So stereotypes and myths are central concerns for sport for all because they limit people's behaviour, they limit expectations, they deny our individuality. They constrain aspiration and achievement. That's terrible. We can't allow that. Those of us who are in sport education must always recognise and challenge that. And they affect the ways, of course, in which resources are allocated and services are delivered. Now, anomalies are exceptions to the rule. Probably nearly every woman in this room, when she was growing up, had said to her, "You're a tomboy," or "Your favourite sport." Tomboys are anomalies. They're exceptions to the rule. I'm proud of being an anomaly. But I think it's really hard for some young people to be anomalies. The problem in sport is that they are a nuisance. Transgendered people are a nuisance in sport because of the difficulties of category definition. It's really important for us to recognise what people are doing when they push boundaries. And normative isn't the same as normal. It's just the same. Normative is about being usual. It's not even logical. So here's a great anomaly example. This German boy competitor in synchronised swimming. And you can see this quotation. He says the German Swimming Association applied to the International Swimming Association, FINA, 2 years ago to let me compete, but FINA rejected it. I believe the officials don't want to see any men in this sport. You can already sense that at the national level. Many of the judges are much more strict in their scoring of me than they are with my female competitors. It's not fair. What is logical about excluding men from synchronized swimming? Historically, I understand why it's happened. Because this grew as a female sport in reaction to being excluded from some of the sports which were seen as masculine. But it shouldn't continue as a historical, silly, unjustified exclusion. Here's another good example. Different reasons here for covering the body in sport. Very similar visual images. But Cathy Freeman wearing that speed suit and the Bahraini athlete competing for the first time in the Olympic Games were wearing those clothes for different reasons. And international federations need to recognise people's choices. The Accept and Respect Declaration about Muslim and women's sport addresses that. I think the Sport for All movement should be talking to international federations to say, why, for instance, are female boxers being told they've got to wear skirts in the ring? Well, we all know why. It's not about, as the International Federation says, being able to tell the difference between men and women. I think all of us can do that. So let's challenge a few things. Let's make sure that it's about our human spirit, how to nurture the entire person, how to make sure that our sports are accessible and welcoming to those who wish to play it. This is a really deep quotation, and I haven't got time really to go into it, but you'll see it in the presentation when you get it. But I do think it's important to recognise the need for collaboration and cooperation as we go through into this world which seems at the moment to be so dominated by competition, as it says here, greed. And that's because we work within these paradigms. Paradigm occurred several times yesterday, and it certainly occurred in Brian's mission statement about what Sport for All should be doing. And it's about looking at the way we think and thinking outside that way. That's why it's outside our comfort zone. This is how paradigms get respectability. These dynamic leaders sell their ideas. Government agencies then sort of accept them. Educators put them forward, and then we have conferences talking about them. And that's why everybody thinks it's got to be that way. But paradigm and myth are also really related. And Sport for All is about changing the lens through which we look at the world. The world of sport and the people who play and run it. And changing their minds too. The problem is that we so often have paradigm paralysis. It's a great term, I think, because people find it too uncomfortable to look outside the box. Of course women have got to play skirts if they play sport. How silly is that? It's like saying that men can't do synchronized swimming. And paradigm shifts are scary. They're tough to face up to. But if sport is exclusive, and it does seem to exclude an awful lot of groups, women are 52% of the world population. That's very exclusive. Children are our future. That's very exclusive. Surely then it's sport which has to change. And look at these known factors in children's participation in sport. These are known factors. We've known about them for decades. This is what prevents children sport. So how can sport respond to make itself more accessible to children? I love this cartoon. Of course he's being childish, but he's a child. So what kinds of sport, what kinds of people? Who decides what's appropriate? How are decisions accountable and to whom? So what about sports science for older people, who are a very, very large percentage of the developed world now? People with learning and physical disabilities, people who are overweight or underweight, people who don't want to excel. That's what Sport for All is about. Why isn't Sport for All driving more sports science? And another example of paradigm is this whole discussion about talent. Oh, he's a born athlete, people will say. She is a natural dancer. Africans have natural rhythm. I've seen Africans who haven't got natural rhythm. They look like funky chickens when they're trying to dance. I've seen men who hate physical contact sports. These are myths. And talent really needs to be looked at in the same way. So it's not just about genetics and accidents of birth. It's about all sorts of other contingencies. It's about where you live. It's about who you bump into as you first get into sport. It's about inspirational coaches. It's about a critical mass of other competitors. And we've got so many pieces of research now which show us that talent development isn't about genetics alone. In other words, we can make a difference to the nurturing of talent. And what it tells us when you bring all this stuff, all this research together, is keeping people in the game for as long as possible is what talent development should be about. Because it provides a richer pool for the development of talent. And this is supported by all the leisure data, all the participation data, the long-term athlete development data, and by pedagogical ideologies. And this is a nice little piece of triangulation. We researchers like triangulation because it allows us to say, well, we can confirm what we think, because from 3 different angles, we're being told the same. And the same message with these 3 sources of evidence here is really a strong message. Delayed selection and sustained participation go together. So there isn't a polarity, or there shouldn't be a polarity, between elite sport and sport for all. So let's change the participation pyramid into a house. That's what it should look like. We should be aiming to keep people within those 4 walls for as long as possible, and nurturing that talent at the top from a much wider and deeper base. It's a better balance for sport for all and elite, if we do that. So the agenda for researchers needs to be driven by sport for all, just as much as it is, in my view, overdriven at the moment by elite sport. I'm not interested in what happens to the physiology of the adductor muscles of the 4th finger of my left hand. I'm really not interested in that. I am interested in whether a small child in an inner city gets the chance to play sport. And that's why I think sports science and sport for all need to work together so much more closely. So let's look freshly at sports science relationships. So whether you're a practitioner, a researcher, or a policymaker, committing to respecting the knowledge and the experience of others, so important, and to commit to learning from each other. Knowledge is power, and wisdom comes from understanding how to apply it. And that's what conferences are for, isn't it? It's not just to know things, it's to know what to do with what you know. So yes, we've got bridges, and we need bridges over troubled water between countries, between cultures. Children don't need bridges. They're taught to distance themselves from each other. They're not born like that. We need to learn from children. And this is one of my favourite poets, a Greek poet, TAFISA. And this poem, I think, is all about making sure that you don't allow these gaps, these walls, to be built around you. Without consideration, without pity, without shame, they build great and high walls around me. And now I sit here in despair. I think of nothing else. This fate gnaws at my mind. For I have many things to do outside. Why did I not pay attention when they were building the walls? But I never heard any noise or sound of builders. Imperceptibly, they shut me from the outside world. We can't afford that. We can't afford the walls around us. Because we have choices. Is this what we want for our children? And again, I'll read it for the translators. Dear Andy, how have you been? Your mother and I are fine, we miss you. Please sign off your computer and come downstairs for something to eat. Love, Dad. Do we want that? Or do we want that? I know